Welcome to Backstage Melody, where music's biggest hits reveal their untold stories. This is the song that started as a quiet goodbye and became a global anthem, written in heartbreak, rejected by Elvis, resurrected by Whitney. It didn't just top charts, it changed lives. You know, I Will Always Love You. But do you know the fight behind it? Let's go backstage. It was 1973, and behind Dolly Parton's bright smile and rhinestone sparkle was a storm brewing. For 7 years, she had been the shining star of the Porter Wagoner Show, a staple of country television. Porter wasn't just her boss, he was her mentor, her champion, and in some complicated way, her partner. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable. Off-screen, things were far more tangled. Porter had discovered Dolly when she was still just a voice with a dream. He'd given her a platform when Nashville still wasn't sure what to make of a blonde bombshell who could write circles around most of the men in town. But what started as a launchpad soon became a cage. As her fame skyrocketed, so did Porter's need to control it. He managed her career, wrote duets with her, and made it clear that the spotlight was something they shared, or not at all. Behind closed doors, tension simmered. Dolly wanted to grow, Porter wanted to hold on. And then, quietly one night, she wrote a song. It wasn't a protest, it wasn't angry, it was gentle, final, and filled with a love that couldn't survive staying. If I should stay, I would only be in your way. The next day she walked into Porter's office, guitar in hand. She didn't argue, she didn't explain, she sang, and Porter cried. But that moment of tenderness didn't last. When she left the show in 1974, he felt betrayed. In interviews, he lashed out, calling her ungrateful, cold, even manipulative. Privately, he demanded $3 million in damages. The man who once introduced her as the most talented woman I've ever met now tried to crush her on the way out. Dolly didn't respond with words. She responded with grace and a check. She agreed to pay him $1 million despite not having the money. It took her years to repay, dollar by dollar. But she didn't hold a grudge. Years later, when Porter was on his deathbed, it was Dolly who came to say goodbye. That song, her song, became their eulogy. And when it hit #1 on the Billboard country charts, it didn't just mark a musical milestone. It marked the moment Dolly Parton broke free, and did it with a farewell so beautiful, it made history. Fresh off the success of her first #1. One solo hit, Dolly Parton was flying high. But she had no idea that her biggest test was just around the corner. Word of "I Will Always Love You" spread fast in the music industry. Nashville loved it. Country radio adored it. But then, the unthinkable happened. Elvis Presley wanted to record it, the king of rock and roll. It was the kind of offer most artists would sell their souls for. To have Elvis sing your song, it was like being knighted by music royalty. His voice could turn a simple tune into a classic. His name alone could immortalize a song forever. And Dolly was ecstatic at first. She started imagining the possibilities, the iconic voice, the global reach, the validation. This was a man whose covers made careers. If Elvis sang her song, it would mean the world. But then came the condition. Elvis didn't record anything unless he got half the publishing rights. His manager, the infamous Colonel Tom Parker, made that clear. Half. That meant half of every dollar the song would ever earn, half of its future, half of its soul. And Dolly? She froze. This wasn't just any song. It wasn't a throwaway single or a record label experiment. This was her goodbye, her heart, her history, her freedom. Written in her handwriting, born from her pain. She called a meeting with her team. They laid it out clearly. If she said yes, she might become a household name overnight. But if she said no, she'd be turning down the most powerful artist in the world. And she said no. Not angrily, not arrogantly, just firmly. I just couldn't do it, she later said. Even though it broke my heart, I had to stand up for myself and what that song meant to me. It was a moment that defined her, not just as an artist, but as a businesswoman. She walked away from Elvis Presley with tears in her eyes and conviction in her gut. Decades later, she would look back on that decision as one of the smartest and bravest she'd ever made. Because the rights she protected, they would go on to earn her tens of millions of dollars. But more importantly, they kept her legacy intact. She didn't just write the song, she owned it, and that made all the difference. By the early 1980s, Dolly Parton was more than just a country star. She was a cultural force. Her hair was big, her smile even bigger, and her ambition had no ceiling. She wasn't just chasing chart success anymore. She was stepping into Hollywood, determined to cross over into mainstream stardom. But even as she moved forward, one song kept following her: "I Will Always Love You." In 1982, she signed on to co-star with Burt Reynolds in a film called The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. It wasn't exactly Oscar bait, but it was high profile, and Dolly saw an opportunity. She didn't write a new ballad, she didn't chase a trend. She reached back into her soul and pulled out the song that had never really let her go. This time, she gave it new life, a slightly different arrangement, more polished production, a softer vocal tone. And just like that, it hit number one. Won again. Same woman, same lyrics, same emotion, 2 different decades and still topping charts. It was unheard of. This wasn't just a hit anymore. It was becoming a thread through Dolly's career. Every time she evolved, the song evolved with her. Then, in 1995, she brought it back once more, this time as a haunting duet with country superstar Vince Gill. What started as a goodbye had become a legacy piece, a time capsule, a spiritual checkpoint in her career, and the radio couldn't resist it. Without a full album or massive label push, the duet soared. It earned a Grammy nomination. Radio stations picked it up organically. Fans, young and old, rediscovered the song yet again. For Dolly, it proved something she had always believed but rarely said out loud. A great song doesn't age. It doesn't expire. It just waits for the right time to be heard again. And "I Will Always Love You" was patient. It knew its moment in history wasn't finished, not even close. By the early 90s, The Bodyguard was little more than a dusty script sitting on a Hollywood shelf. Originally written in the 1970s, the movie had bounced from one production company to another. Stars like Steve McQueen and Diana Ross were once attached, but nothing ever materialized. Studios loved the idea, a romantic thriller about a bodyguard falling for the superstar he's hired to protect. But no one could quite figure out how to make it work, until Kevin Costner stepped in. Fresh off the success of Dances with Wolves, Costner was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, and he had a clear vision. This movie needs Whitney Houston. At the time, Whitney was a global icon in music, but she had never acted a day in her life. People thought it was a risky move. Why gamble a big-budget movie on a first-time actress? But Costner wasn't just thinking about casting, he was thinking about chemistry. He believed that Whitney's vulnerability, strength, and mystique were exactly what the story needed. And he was so sure he did something unheard of. He delayed the entire production by a full year just to wait for her to be available. Even then, there was one massive problem left. What song would define the film? The original plan was to use "What Becomes of the Broken-Hearted" as the main theme. It had the right tone, sad, soulful, familiar. Whitney even recorded demos of it. But just weeks before, filming, another artist, Paul Young, released his own version. It began climbing the charts fast. Suddenly, they were out of time. They needed a new song, something just as emotional, just as timeless. And that's when Kevin Costner remembered a song he'd loved for years, a song from the other side of the music universe, pure country. What about Dolly Parton's "I Will Always Love You"? At first, people thought he was joking. Dolly, country, in a high-stakes romantic thriller? But Costner wasn't backing down. He played the track on set. He asked everyone to listen, not to the genre, but to the emotion. And slowly, people began to hear what he heard. A farewell, a confession, a raw truth that didn't need to be flashy, just real. Costner had no idea that he was about to help turn that quiet country goodbye into the most iconic love song of the decade. It's hard to imagine now, with millions of people around the world humming those first lines. But when Kevin Costner proposed starting "I Will Always Love You" with no music, the room nearly exploded. He wanted Whitney to open the track a cappella, no intro, no piano chords, no string section, just Whitney, alone, singing into silence. In the world of pop music, that was unheard of. It was commercial suicide. Every producer in the room balked. David Foster, a hit-making legend who was producing the song, nearly laughed out loud. He'd built his entire career on lush arrangements, dramatic crescendos, and radio-perfect polish. "That'll never work," he said. "You can't open a single like that. Radio won't touch it." Even Clive Davis, the powerful head of Arista Records and Whitney's longtime mentor, was cautious. A cappella openings were for demo tapes, not global movie soundtracks, but Costner was relentless. "In my movie," he said, "she's going to sing it without music, just her voice, because the character is saying goodbye, for real, and it has to feel that way." Reluctantly, the team agreed, for the film version only. Foster went back to the studio and added instrumentation for the single version. He layered it, polished it, made it radio-ready. But something was missing: the rawness, the truth. That version, it never got released. Because when Clive Davis heard the original cut, just Whitney, no filter, he felt it in his bones. "It was haunting," he said. "You don't touch that kind of magic." Even Dolly Parton remembers where she was the first time she heard it on the radio. She was driving outside Nashville when those first words hit her. "If I should stay, I thought I was going to have a heart attack," she later joked. "It was like hearing a piece of myself reborn, bigger and more powerful than I'd ever imagined." What Costner had understood, and what no one else saw, was this: when you've got Whitney Houston, you don't need anything else, not even music. When The Bodyguard premiered in November 1992, the critics were mixed. Some called it melodramatic. Others dismissed the plot as cliché. But no one, not one reviewer, fan, or cynic, could ignore the power of the song. From the very first time it hit radio, Whitney Houston's version of "I Will Always Love You" didn't just climb the charts, it dominated them. The song stayed at number one on the Billboard Hot 100 for 14 consecutive weeks, breaking records left and right. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. It topped the charts in over 25 countries, sold more than 20 million copies worldwide, and became the best-selling single by a female artist in music history. Whitney's vocals were so breathtaking, so emotionally explosive, they became the new gold standard for power ballads. From wedding receptions to farewell montages, high school dances to karaoke heartbreaks, "I Will Always Love You" embedded itself in global culture. Meanwhile, Dolly Parton was watching from the sidelines, stunned, grateful, and earning an estimated $6 to $10 million in royalties throughout the 1990s. That money would later help her buy back her full music catalog and fund several of her charitable foundations. "People say it's Whitney's song now," Dolly said with a laugh. "And I say, that's fine, just make sure the check comes to me." The song no longer belonged to one woman, it belonged to everyone. It was no longer just a farewell. It has become a global love letter. On February 11th, 2012, the world stopped. Whitney Houston, the voice of a generation, was gone. News of her passing spread like wildfire, and with it, one song returned to the airwaves like a whisper through grief: "I Will Always Love You." The very next night, the Grammy Awards were held in Los Angeles. No one had time to plan. No overproduced tributes, just a stage, a spotlight, and Jennifer Hudson standing in silence. She began to sing. No fanfare, no theatrics, just raw emotion. "And I will always love you." You could hear the heartbreak in her voice. You could feel it in the room. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. At that moment, it wasn't just a tribute, it was a funeral song, one the entire world was singing together. The track re-entered the Billboard Top 10, decades after its original release. But Whitney's legacy didn't end there. In 1993, the song had already proven its strange power to drive people a little mad. In one bizarre UK case, a woman was jailed for a week for playing it on repeat so loud it rattled her neighbor's windows. In another, a neighbor hurled a stereo, blasting the song out of a fourth-floor window, triggering an actual assault case. And in 2017, comedian Will Ferrell ended a graduation speech by whispering the lyrics into a pretend student's ear, leaving the audience laughing and crying in equal measure. Because somehow, even in parody, the song still carried weight. It had become more than a hit. It was an emotional shorthand for grief, for love, for goodbye. And every time the world needed to remember her, Whitney's voice rose again. This song was never meant for the world. It was written for one man in a small office in Nashville, a quiet goodbye between two people whose partnership had come to an end. But it didn't stay quiet. It grew, it changed hands, it crossed genres, decades, and oceans. It became the sound of broken hearts, of goodbyes too big for words, of love that lingers long after it's gone. I Will Always Love You isn't just a song anymore. It's a moment, a memory, a monument to what music can do. And maybe that's the most powerful thing of all. A song that started in silence, ended up echoing through time. If this story moved you, imagine what else we've got coming. Subscribe to Backstage Melody for more untold stories behind the greatest songs in music history. Heartbreaks, breakthroughs, and the moments that changed everything. Who sang I Will Always Love You best, Dolly or Whitney? Or does the magic lie in the way it connected them both? And tell us, which legendary song should we explore next? Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep listening for the story behind the melody.